Good evening, everybody. Welcome back for another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan, and in the co-pilot seat, there he is, the man, the myth, the legend, Julio Vela. JV, what's up?
How you doing, Jimmy?
I'm okay, man. It's been I had a great day actually in federal court.
Nice.
I had an even better day than Paul Manafort did, getting his huge variance. But yeah, it was a good day. It's a good day, despite the crappy weather around town.
Anytime
Good day.
that Ann Johnson's around, the sun is shining, the birds are singing.
The sun was shining on us the other day as we ran Memorial Park.
That's right. You lapped me twice. You run faster.
I was not exactly setting land speed records, trust me.
I know, that speaks to my speed, so thanks. Thanks for calling me out on that.
People will not confuse me with Roger Bannister. It's not.
You looked good, though. You had a good pace.
It was manageable.
It was early.
It was early.
Cold.
It was cold.
We were out there.
Yeah. I did not have like the full ski mask on or anything. I was letting the air burn my lungs.
Yeah.
What is this? What is this called?
Running.
Running.
I don't know. I can swim.
I mean, look, I think swimming is frankly a better skill and talent to have than running, if you ask me. I mean, what's more likely that you're going to need to save your life? Swimming.
Well,
You're not going to outrun anything. But at least the swimming, you can keep yourself alive instead of drowning.
well,
Actually, I can speak to that. You're not going to outrun anything.
What's the old joke?
You were outrunning me, though, which is pretty bad.
Well,
so,
hey, if we come across a bear,
that's
all
right.
I gotta
I'm
do
the
is
one
outrun
going.
you.
That's
Which
exactly
I've
right.
already
So now you just know.
I just don't have
I'm
to
always
outrun
going to
the
run with Ann around Memorial Park.
Yeah, or in the woods with
I'm more of a
bears.
speed walker, given my orthopedic.
Were you a mall
history.
walker?
Not yet, but I mean, I may get there. So
Jimmy,
you never know.
that was rude.
What?
He's not a mall walker.
It's a legitimate question. It's a legitimate question. No, it's not.
It's like the tunnel walkers. You see people
Dude,
walking
I've
the tunnel.
seen that.
Yeah.
I have seen
People getting in their steps.
walk in the tunnels.
Getting in their steps.
Because it's, I mean, if you walk outside on our streets, you're going to get yelled at by homeless people dropping F-bombs at you for no reason. Happened to me the other day.
I got called an illegal the other day. It's like, you illegal, handsome mother. I was like, whoa. What happened?
By like a normal person? Or
No,
like-
well, yeah. Well, speaking of steps,
Did they have a MAGA hat on or what?
She did have a MAGA hat on. Or didn't? She didn't. We're supposed to be neutral here.
Well, but we're not. We're all from the University of Texas, so we are not.
That's right.
We are not
Hook
neutral.
'em.
Is this where we sing the alma mater? The eyes of Texas
I mean,
are
gonna sing the whole
upon you. All
I don't think they really want that.
well.
We're gonna upset. Did you see? Apparently, West Virginia has now permanently done the horns
saw.
down on the standings.
I saw it. That means we ought to go undefeated now. I mean, when you put the horns down, I mean, it's almost a guarantee, right?
Yeah.
We're going to win.
I will say
So-
though, I don't know if you saw this on social media, but there is this. Well, for lack of a better term, we'll just call him an idiot. And he's one of us who tattooed the hook 'em horn symbol right here on his wrist.
Oh.
Okay.
So it's constantly down.
Well, no, he tattooed it this way, so it's up. But what happens when you do horns up?
Oh, yeah.
The other side's going to be down.
It's a mirror image.
But he could do like this. I think
That's the way we're going to have to go with it.
I know.
Yeah, he didn't think that all the way
He
through.
didn't- no,
But how
it's
great
not.
is that an entire university has a sign with the horns down? I mean, it's free space.
It really is.
We
It
occupy.
really is. We're going to be here for the next hour, ladies and gentlemen. We might continue to talk about UT things. We were talking before we got on the air, but before I get to that, if you want to call in, 713-807-1794 is the number. You can also hit us up on Twitter at HCCLA_TV. And we're going to get to some criminal justice issues at some point. I don't know when. Because I wanted to bring up one other thing we were talking about. The trip. You ran into each other at Ruska's.
Yeah. On the way to Austin last year.
Perhaps the greatest stop for kolaches on the road between here and the capital city. I said you haven't really made that trip until you have done the trip to Austin and back in one day and stopped at Ruska's both in the morning on your way up there and in the afternoon on your way back. That I think proves you have really made that trip. And you're,
I'm a veteran then.
yeah,
I can't help but stop.
I know.
It's a great place.
You know, last time I was going through there, I ran into Ann. And you sit there and you talk and you're driving and you kind of stretch out and then you just meet some folk that you know.
But I also got to meet your kids, and I love the T-shirts they had on. Do you remember? They had on the drop the mic, and
Yes,
do you want to tell everybody about the
think it
T-shirt?
Drop the mic.
It was like drop the mic, drop the encore, the remix, drop the mic, and I think the little one has something like I'm the girl or something, and I'm daddy's angel or something like that.
Yeah, y'all were all prepared for the game. You looked fantastic. Kids are adorable. Wife is wonderful. I got to meet the whole family.
We bought the shirts there, not those shirts, but we needed UT gear,
Yeah, you
swag, and we bought it there as well. It's a good place to be.
It is. It is. I guess we should move into some actual conversation of the law.
Well, yes.
Do you have something else you want to get to?
Well, there was something on
Nonsensical that we
There
should
was
talk
something on LSU. I'm nothing but nonsensical. But there was something on the TV monitor earlier. Something about there was this LSU coach getting in trouble for some recruiting issue.
Well, no, that's the corruption case that's going on, and there's been a superseding federal indictment in that case, and I guess TCU has also come up in the new superseding indictment.
What's it about?
So it's about the shoe deals, the deals that are being made between the coaches, the schools, and like Adidas, and it's a mess. It's a whole mess. I mean, we could do a whole show on that, but that's kind of the 30,000-foot view of it. And I haven't delved too deeply into it, but I've got enough that I know kind of what it's about. And the sad thing about that case is that you really are seeing the dirty underbelly of the NCAA, and but it's a business. They want to continue to say this is amateur athletics, and it's not. It's just not. I mean, and the fact that we are still trying to maintain this purity of the athleticism with regard to especially the football players who are the main money-making generator of the schools. I mean, they're making so much money for University of Texas, Texas A&M, that they are literally, the football team is giving money. They're supporting the other programs, and they give back to the educational side. I mean, I think I saw the athletic department gave like $15 million back to the educational side of the university.
I don't remember the exact figure, but
it's up there.
Yeah, University of Texas and Texas A&M in athletics, they bring in so much, and they do give the revenue back.
Almost $200 million in revenue is what UT grossed. They did a thing, and they said if you were going to value the University of Texas football program like you would an NFL team or something, it would be worth $1.5 billion.
I would estimate it at $2 billion, really.
I mean, who knows? I'd pay a lot for that.
Speaking
that brand, but no, I mean, I think now you've got greed, corruption, all coming out in a federal trial. When the way to solve all that is just pay everybody, make it a minor league sports system.
Yep.
I mean, really, think about it. If you wanted to leave, or if one of us, while we're in college, we want to start a business or go work somewhere, we're not precluded from it. Even if you're on an academic scholarship, you're not precluded from going work. I mean, Michael Dell started Dell from within his freaking dorm room at UT. He became a billionaire because of it. And these guys, we're restraining their ability to make money. I don't know. I think it's kind of crazy.
Well, speaking of vulnerable populations.
And rich football teams.
Yeah. There's one other news story though. I want to keep the viewers cliffhanging because Ann is a human trafficking expert. we're about to get to the good stuff.
So we've got one more thing before we actually get into.
Well, two other big things in the news.
Okay.
One of them is that you hear about the judge on the East Coast who got convicted or who got sentenced for sending the Utes to the detention center and he was getting kickbacks.
Right.
And getting these kickbacks are covering them via some sort of shell company out in Florida. And I think I don't know how many years he got, but did you hear about this? Do you know anything about this?
Yes. Well, I heard about this one, and then it may be the same case, but this has gone on for a little while where you've had, unfortunately, some juvenile judges in other states that were getting kickbacks from corporations for sending kids to placement. And that's outrageous. So I don't know how you defend that conduct.
What I understood was there were two judges involved. One judge secured the contracts, and the other judge basically built a pipeline. And instead of for these juveniles who were getting these lower level types of offenses and who generally would not have received any days in jail or a detention facility, were getting sent over to this detention facility where they had a private interest and or were receiving monies in return for per kid going over there.
Right. Yeah, that kind of leads into where we were, how I got started in human trafficking, which was the case of N. Ray BW, which was a 13-year-old girl being charged with prostitution.
Yeah.
And the local DA's office at the time prosecuting it. And so it gave me a chance, because it was a case of first impression, to try to figure out the law on it. And you dig into those Supreme Court juvenile cases that recognize that we can't treat children more harshly than adults. And so we have to remember that in juvenile justice, when kids are getting sent to placement, they are getting sent to juvenile jail, and we are starting them on that path. And the thought that a judge is making that decision, not because it's in the best interest of the child, but because they're getting a kickback, that's the kind of thing that you fear the most. And so I think it's great that it's been uncovered.
Well, and it's the problem that persists at private prisons at all levels, not just the juvenile level, but the adult level too. I mean, there has been, countless.
It's big money.
It's big money, and you've got, U.S. senators and stuff sitting on the boards of some of these companies, former U.S. senators. I mean, you've got Dick Cheney on one of the boards of this company. I mean, these are the guys who basically are in charge of passing the sentencing rules, the sentencing guidelines, which, send people to prison.
Let's keep them there, and the longer we keep them there,
right,
the more money we make.
Correct.
And I'm sure you guys have talked about it, and I'm sure you've already let your viewers know. We have clients that get shipped over to Louisiana.
Yeah.
And so we pay the state of Louisiana to house our inmates waiting for trial.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Speaking of of juveniles in the system, one of the things this article, I think, out of the New York Times said or talked about was the different rights that adults have from juveniles. So, for example, I'm no juvenile expert. However, I believe a juvenile in the state of Texas can waive his rights and basically talk to the judge, waive all his rights without an attorney present, and talk to the judge about anything he wants or whatever the questions are that the judge would ask. I find that incredible that Texas. I could be wrong, and correct me if I am, but I find it incredible that I know that there are some states in this country that allow a juvenile where science has recognized that they have different brain developments, that they're in different stages of development, they handle trauma differently, they react to social settings differently, that they could waive these fundamental rights without an attorney. Have you seen any of that, or do you know if that's the law here in Texas? I'm pretty sure they can waive.
Yeah, and y'all may know this as well. When you go to juvenile, there are times where the judge or a magistrate can give them warnings, right?
Right.
Without a lawyer, and they can do whatever they do. You're absolutely right. And what I like to remind clients and their parents, which is your brain does not fully develop cognitively until you're 25. And so in Texas, we start treating kids.
In Julio's case, it's 35. But.
Well, he's with us. So in Texas, when you're 17, you're considered an adult, right? And so I think there is a significant issue, and I've been pretty outspoken about raise the age. I think we need to have some consistency within the law between if you're If you're a child under every other provision of contracts and family law, at the age of 18, why are we sending you to adult jail, to prisons at the age of 17? And people don't realize that when you're in juvenile court, you not only get an attorney, but you have somebody there to look out for your best interest. And so you may have a parent that will step in, and if the parent's not appropriate for best interest, you get a guardian. When you're 17 and you're sitting in the jail and you're charged with theft, and they say, hey, do you want time served? And we have to say, hey, the offer's time served.
Yeah.
There's nobody to say, dude,
Yeah.
don't take that, because now you're going to be convicted of theft for life.
Well, yeah, and I want to share the story that I dealt with in that situation out in Fort Bend County in the old regime, in the Healy regime, where some of those prosecutors out there were just vicious. Okay, and I represented a young black male who had just turned 18, and they were passing around a lot of the kids, and he had some mental deficiencies, but not enough to be declared incompetent. There wasn't a competency issue there, but he had been, for instance, he had had a brain kind of, not encephalitis, but a blood disease that had affected his brain a little bit. He had suffered from sickle cell for a little while, so there were some, some issues there were judgment issues with him, clearly, right? But not enough where he didn't understand what was going on. So I was really kind of limited in what I could do in this case. So he's at school and he gets a card, which is, he tells the story. Well, they told me it was, a prepaid Visa card, had the Visa logo and everything, and they gave me the PIN number. And, and what had happened is this one kid was letting everybody use his debit card that he shared with his mom. Okay? And it had gotten passed around, and it ended up in my client's hand. So he takes it, and he goes to the Buc-ee's out there in Sugar Land, and he does, I'm not making this up, 2 swipes, one for a bag of Cheetos, then decides he wants a Coke, so he swipes it again, all less than $5. And you know what the Fort Bend County DA's office charged him with?
Forgery.
2 counts of credit card, debit card abuse, state jail felonies, all for less than $5 worth of items. And they wouldn't waive their right to a jury trial until at the end, and even then, all they would let me do was plead to the judge. They wouldn't just dismiss it or give it a pretrial diversion.
Right.
It was like, and it wasn't a case where, it wasn't a case where you could win. You couldn't take it. You literally have to try that case on jury nullification. Are you going to do that in Fort Bend County? Hell no.
Not with that.
No.
No. But what's good is that the people that are now, I'll give a shout out to Fort Bend. I think Fort Bend saw a big change this last election. I know some of the. We all know. I mean, they were well-known people who took the highest offices, the district attorney's office, the first assistant. We knew these people, and I think that they are, from what I hear and the enthusiasm that they had coming in, they're doing some real good things down there. And I just hope. I haven't had a case down there yet since they've been there. Yeah. I have some that are pending.
What?
Yeah, I still teach at South Texas College of Law, and I love teaching. And I've been a prosecutor, and there's that provision of the Code of Criminal Procedure that I love to remind them of. The duty of the prosecutor is not to convict, but to see that justice is done. And a lot of times that can be a dismissal.
Yeah.
When you can find a way to keep somebody from being trapped within the revolving door of criminal justice. And so I think having individuals that have been on both sides, right, and have seen the system from both perspectives, and have that freedom to be able to say, I want to do what I think is the right thing, is what we all hope for.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be such a hard thing. I mean, I was never a prosecutor, and neither was Julio, but, I mean, there are so many times when you can just see that a prosecutor is trying a case because they need the trial experience. They need to get this trial, or they need, they need to get another pelt on the wall in order to get that next promotion. And that's tough, right? Because, as much as you have ethical duties and everything else, this is also a job. It's a career. And people are trying to get ahead in their career.
Let me share this story. I have a van.
And most people don't get ahead for dismissing cases.
So I
For
have this-
dismissing cases or for
No,
for trying to?
No, for
Yeah,
dismissing cases. You know, it's not like you get extra points.
You
and-
say most people get ahead for
No,
dismissing?
I said
no.
they don't.
Okay, well, it
Yeah.
came out the other way.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all right. I'm helping you out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sometimes.
So what's the story? Is it a good one?
So let me share a story about Ann. So it must have been a year or 2 years ago. You know, Ann's hustling and bustling as she does around the courthouse. Standard kind of stuff, just kicking butt everywhere. I'm in a court and she comes in, and obviously everybody looks up, and you know, and she says hello to everybody, and everybody says hello to her, and we get back to business. And there's this brand new district attorney on this case, and it's a prostitution case. And goes to this brand new prosecutor, full of zeal and enthusiasm about what they're doing. And it's a total terrible failure of a case. Ann comes up and gives a 30-second, "This is why you're going to lose" spiel. And I'm sitting there doing a reset, and I said, yeah, check, 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 check. Yeah, they lost. They've already lost. But the prosecutor says, you know, it's a good case. We could try it. You know, and Ann's looking at this prosecutor and saying, no, these are your you know, I used to train those officers. I actually used to train them at the district attorney's office, and they did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, and this wrong, and I know them personally. And believe me, they've screwed up. And the prosecutor, and the same thing was like, well, we could try it. We might as well just set it and go to trial. And Ann said, okay. And I think you literally looked at me and said, watch this. Within a week, the thing was gone and dismissed, and you know, and the prosecutor's sitting there like, whoa, what just happened? But that's that mentality that's still around, that needs to change, that trying a case just to try it, or just for the fun of it, or just for the experience of it, is it's a terrible policy, and it's a terrible position to receive that as well.
I'll also say, you know, when you're a baby prosecutor, most of the time you're fresh out of law school.
Yeah.
You're getting thrown all these files. And I remember when I started and I said, hey, what do I need to do to get ready? And George Weissfish was the chief in the court, and he said, read the penal code. And I was like, that is a great
one.
tip, right? That's the step.
Amazing place to start.
Amazing place to start. But, you know, I was lucky. I had some really good chiefs,
Yeah.
right? And I had some that said, and I always held true to this as a prosecutor, I gave my best offer before trial. And my view was always, if you want to take responsibility, let's find a way to make you or have you take responsibility fairly and move on. And I think that's good for the defendant, and I think it's good for the victim. And yeah, I actually do remember that case, and thank God for body camera. Because now with body camera, when you look at it and you can say, hey, I know you don't know what they're supposed to be doing, but they didn't do this, they didn't do this, and it's going to come out. And so fortunately, you know, for a lot of them, they have to go to their chief and say, hey, she's saying all this, what do you think? And then, of course, when they get to somebody and go, oh, yeah, we screwed this up. And people make mistakes. But that's the nice thing about body camera now. When you have it, you know, you get to look at it and you get to say, wow, this is not at all the way that it was coming out in an offense report. So I think it's a great step for us. And I do think prosecutors try. There's always the exception.
Absolutely.
And that's a hard battle, is figuring out, can I talk to this prosecutor? Can I let them know their problems? Are they open to it? Or are they just going to say, no, let's go to trial?
How long were you at the DA's office?
So first time, a little more than 3 years, and got diagnosed with cancer, left.
Right, I remember that.
You can't do that job if he's sick at the same time. And then I came back to start the Human Trafficking Division. I was there for 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long have you been gone now?
2 years.
No, I was going to say like 5
it's been 2
years.
years.
Like, are you
No,
serious?
5 years. Yeah,
It's been like 2 years?
No, 2.
So here.
Yeah, so 2 years. Anna and I, our practice is 2 years old this month.
Wow, I didn't realize that. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought it was a little longer too. Do you find, I mean, there's a lot of fresh faces there, obviously. A lot of people are no longer at the office. And, I mean, I've heard people say this who were former prosecutors that, you know, oftentimes when you leave the office, obviously there's people who you trained and who worked under you. And, you know, you come back as a defense lawyer, and a lot of times you'll have some, it'll be easy because those people will respect your opinions, and sometimes you can have an easier dialogue. But then the people that you don't know you were a former prosecutor, don't know you were at the office, they're just like, psh, who are you? You know, get the hell out of here. Have you had that kind of experience?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you'll have these baby prosecutors that'll come in. And I think part of it is insecurity. They don't really know, and so they put on this really tough persona, right? And I think the general rule is be nice to everybody.
I agree. You know,
Sure.
my rule is here's what I do. I always say you treat everybody like you would want to be treated until they lie to you. If somebody, you know, I'm going to sit there and be as nice as I can to a prosecutor until either A, they lie to me, or they're just an ass to me. One of the two, you know. And I mean, I've had that. And even when they are a jerk to me, I'm kind of like, all right, I'm going to let this slide because, you know, whatever, it's okay. I mean, I had a different experience because what happened for me was, you know, having never been a prosecutor, nobody knew me other than the people I'd gone to law school with who went to the DA's office. So, you know, I started out as a defense lawyer, and the people that I know, they're all in misdemeanor and everything, and I'm trying a lot of misdemeanors. Well, of course, everybody moves up, and then as the younger crew comes in, it's like, oh crap, I don't know any of these people.
You got to start over.
Yeah, you got to start over, and you got to start building relationships. So, you know, you go in, and again, that's why I say, I see some of these defense lawyers, and they're just like, you know, going all out hardcore every single case. And it's like, man, you need to kind of learn to build some relationships around this courthouse.
Yeah, I always say we're more civil than civil, right?
Oh, yeah.
And like, God love him, Mr. Dixon, right?
Yeah.
Other folks like that. As soon as you see him, you just give him a big hug.
Yeah.
And I do think the new DAs kind of look around like, what's going on here? Because everybody's friendly, everybody gets to know each other, and we are like a family.
Right.
I mean, but we also have a ton of cases. So
Yes.
today I got you, and you have a bad case. Tomorrow you got me. And so you can't take anything personally. You can't get all bent out of shape.
And I think a lot of defense lawyers, and I get it, I mean, a lot of people want to keep up their image that they're a hardcore fighter. They don't want their clients to see you laughing, you know, hugging prosecutors or, you know, hanging out with them, or they think you got to be at war all the time. And I get it. I totally get that. But there's a way to balance it out too. And I think what a lot of lawyers, defense lawyers do is they really manage their clients' expectations very poorly. And so they overcompensate for that by coming in with all this bluster and just thinking that, you know, that's the way they'll do it.
Yeah,
It doesn't work out very well.
No, I've seen lawyers that are really nice people, and then they'll go in on a case, and they're just an absolute jerk.
Yeah.
And they feel like that's what their client wants to see.
Right.
And like on the other side, I see the bailiffs, and I give them a big hug because we all know each other, right? And I do think you catch more flies with honey and then being prepared on your cases. And I don't like that perception that we're almost putting on a show for the client. I also think it causes a concern with the concept of procedural justice, which is a way we should be going in the system, that everybody's treated fairly, that the judge treats the defendants fairly. And so I don't think we should have that aggressive adversarial approach.
And that's why I don't like doing plea negotiations in the courtroom with the clients sitting in the audience. I just think it's a bad situation. I mean, it's bad for everybody, you know. The clients don't need to see how the sausage is made, kind of thing, you know. I mean, it's just it stresses them out, and you put them in a position where, in a lot of cases, they're having to make life-changing decisions with not exactly their friends and family by their side, you know, in a crowded hallway of a courthouse, and they're trying to make a life-changing decision about what to do on a criminal case. And it's a crappy way to do it. I think you want to talk about criminal justice reform, that's where I think we need to reform, is how we're handling bringing people down to the courthouse so frequently and conducting plea negotiations there. I just think that's a bad way to do it.
Not only that, bringing people down while we're waiting for discovery, right? So, and people don't understand, one, because we're all spread in different buildings, condemned buildings at that. We're bouncing around as attorneys. They're sitting there waiting in a courtroom. Everything's crowded. They've had to take off for school, work, or whatever else. And most of the times, we already know it's going to be a reset because they don't have discovery.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be a more efficient way that we can do this. And again, respect the fact that most of the people that we have as indigent defendants are hanging on by a thread and missing that day of work because the court is not ready, and not the court, but the case, right? The evidence.
Right.
And they get really, really frustrated. And then oftentimes they'll take it out on us.
Yeah.
And it's like, I can't make the officers turn in their evidence or the DA have it in a position where we can have it.
Right.
And it is incredibly frustrating. And post-Harvey,
Oh, it's-
almost 2 years, we're still in the same position.
There is at least one thing, if I may dovetail, of this last campaign trail that I haven't really seen manifest. It's the defendant's court appearances.
Right.
I remember everybody talked about a big deal, and look, 1 through 16, y'all been killing it, okay? Y'all are killing it, in my opinion, just rocking and rolling it. Same thing with all the felony district courts, killing it. However, straight up, everybody talked a big deal and a big game about limiting the number of defendant appearances. We're already in March, and I am continuously having bogus resets over and over and over and over because we're waiting for discovery. That's not my fault.
No.
And there has been some times where we should be at like a pretrial conference, and the question is asked, well, you got all the discovery? And me as a defense attorney, I'm like, oh, you mean the video and the 911 and the rip call? No, they haven't gotten any of it,
Yeah.
and we're ready to go to trial. They're going to lose on that.
Well, and I want to ask, I want to get your feelings on this, Ann, because what you did in human trafficking, that involved a lot. You were pulling discovery as a prosecutor from many different angles. I mean, in a lot of cases, you're getting discovery from a whole lot of different agencies, not just state agencies. You're getting them from federal agencies. Sometimes even not what people would normally consider the mainstream agencies. You might get it from constable's office. I mean, you might get on a human trafficking case, I can imagine you might have even 10 different agencies that have discovery because of the web of some of these trafficking organizations, right? And so my question to you as a former prosecutor, put back on your prosecutor hat for just a second here, because I understand, obviously these cases, especially in the human trafficking cases, are very serious cases. But the defendants that are charged, I mean, we talk about the difference in civil law versus criminal law. I mean, if you sue somebody and you don't produce all your discovery to them, if you sue them, you've got the burden of proof. If you don't produce all your discovery to them by that discovery cutoff date, you don't get to use it. I mean, that's it. You're done. You're not getting that stuff in. And I feel like that we apply harsh rules like that when money and property are on the line, but when life and liberty are on the line, we don't hold the government to the same standard of get your act together. If you're gonna bring charges against people, you need to get all your evidence together. You need to have it to the defense by this date. None of this rolling discovery crap and producing discovery, the night before trial or while trial's going on. And I mean, I know that's tough on cases like the human trafficking cases where there's so much stuff coming in, but it really, I think that is something that really needs to be addressed in the criminal world.
Yeah, last case Anna and I tried on the defense side, we were in trial and the officers were uploading stuff into the office.
Oh,
And I was
give me
like,
a
okay,
break.
at what point are we going to where are we going to cut this off?
Right.
And we were in the middle of trial, and that was not the prosecutor's fault, right? I will say on human trafficking cases, they are complicated because a lot of times it's an ongoing investigation.
Yes.
And we were collecting information. This is part of what I know we want to talk about tonight, which is oftentimes people that get arrested as offenders may be victims. And we took the approach when I was human trafficking section chief that the legislature passed post BW, which is a case that we took to the Supreme Court to say, hey, kids are not offenders of child prostitution. The legislature has made incremental changes on behalf of victims, and one of them is creating a defense to prosecution for prostitution under 43.02D. And my reading of that is it's a defense, not an affirmative defense. And I think the legislature was very wise in recognizing the fact that many of the people that get charged as the low-hanging fruit, the women on the streets agreeing to sex for a fee, they are being compelled, caused by some other individual of which they have a quota that they have to report to, and they are manipulated and groomed. They're not going to outcry. And they're not going to say, hey, I'm a human trafficking victim.
Yeah.
So I think they pushed off on the DA's office and the prosecutors the fact that we have an obligation, when I was part of that, to continue to investigate and figure out if that individual was a victim, knowing that as a defense attorney, you can't cooperate if the client's saying no. And so I don't think you can shift this burden to the individual that's arrested for prostitution to say, prove it. Because if that's what they wanted, they would have given us an affirmative defense.
That's correct.
And so that's part of my concern, which is, like when you say on that case, and I said, hey, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this. I think there has to be a very high standard on law enforcement at the time of the arrest. You have to collect the evidence so that the DA's office can make the proper decision and not just go after them as the offender and the person that's engaged in prostitution. But defense attorneys need to know this as well.
Yeah.
Because Anna and I have been appointed to represent a bunch of individuals that are not charged with prostitution, but she and I can see immediately like, oh, this girl's in the game. This UMV is really a John that, her pimp said take the car or whatever else. And I think you have to be able to come forward and say, hey, this is not exactly what you're thinking. This person is a pawn in a larger enterprise. Aggravated robbery, things like that, where the girls are the bait, and they bring in people that can be held up.
I get that. I mean, that is a problem. That is a problem, but it's no different than the drug mules.
Sure.
And I mean, we got drug mules doing life without parole in some cases. I mean, that's been the big thing about reforming the federal sentencing guidelines and trying to get some of these people out, on when President Obama did a bunch of stuff. I mean, that's a tough one.
Is
right?
it is it
To me,
different though?
I mean,
Is it? I mean, one's getting raped and the other is pushing dope.
I know, but I get it. But how as a prosecutor, can you sit there and say, all right, she's a pawn, she's being used, she's going in, I mean,
We said the same things in these conspiracy
correct.
cases. I mean, that's true.
I think the tough part for the prosecutors is going to be this, because, okay, if the argument is she's a pawn and she's being made to steal this car, well, I mean, how's that any different from the person who's, made to be the drug mule because, they were basically essentially forced into doing so because they had to pay off some debt.
I think part of that is awareness, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's been put out is the fact that if you committed any offense because you're a victim of human trafficking, you're supposed to be able to seek a pardon and kind of ask. So I think there is a new recognition of human trafficking, and that's not just sexual exploitation, but that can be labor. And so I do think that we need to think about it. But again, I think that also your concept comes back to not to seek a conviction, but to see that justice is done.
Right.
And being open to see the possible mitigation. But a lot of times what I see are those big bad fish that you talk about, the pimps, the exploiters, and in the game, which is what it's called on the streets for prostitution, pimps may have a stable, meaning they have multiple girls. They brand them, they beat them, they keep them, as their group. And one of them is referred to as the bottom bitch. And that is usually the person that's closest to the pimp. The pimp may have had a child with her, and then she's left to run the game. And so what I'm seeing more is there are more women being in a position of dropping the girls off, making the agreements, and he's over here. And so again, they're being put out for law enforcement in public, and the reality is you've probably got this exploiter behind the curtain knowing, well, they're gonna see them out on the street, she's gonna drop her off in the car, and that's gonna be the end. And that bottom is never gonna give him up. And so you've gotta work even harder to figure out if they're there. In my experience, rarely do you legitimately have a female pimp. I think the pimp is part of another enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, but it does happen. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
we're not here to say it doesn't happen, but again, it's one of those things that's not as often.
So if an individual is committing a crime and that crime is a product of them being a victim of human trafficking, that's a defense. Now, right? Okay,
Let me clarify.
Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah. So the legislature, when there began to be awareness around human trafficking, right? And we've been prosecuting people for prostitution for decades. When I was a baby prosecutor, the policy, and you weren't allowed to think through this, was first offense, and y'all may remember, 10 days, second offense, 30 days, third offense, 90 days, right? We didn't take anything else into consideration, so it wasn't being factored. So the legislature has said if you committed an offense because you're a victim of human trafficking, try to go seek a pardon. And that's one thing, while that's on prostitution, I think that that analysis applies in other cases. And I have to say, my experience with the DA's office and where they've been in that section, I have been able to go to them and say, hey, I think there's something else here.
Yeah.
And then you do things like offer a proffer, right? So that way your
Yeah.
client's not being put in a bad position. But part of it is those of us within the defense bar recognizing the signs of human trafficking and realizing that they may have a level of victimization that they're not going to tell us, right?
How would one seek a pardon? I mean, they're not going to have, a nonprofit would have to sponsor individuals to seek pardons, or somebody on their own would have to have enough means to seek some sort of pardon?
I will say Anna and I try to help people pro bono on that when it's appropriate, but I also think that's not a realistic solution.
Right.
We can't take this massive population and say, hey, Governor Abbott, fix this. So I do think that there needs to be some other recognition of a broader way to try to correct the wrongs that we have committed because we didn't know, right?
But, I mean, you and I both know of a case where it happened over in federal court where there was a victim who's now doing 20 years in federal prison solely because she wouldn't come forward and testify, really. And I wonder how much of that is, also a failure on the part of, for instance, the Department of Justice, to really, as you say, actually meaningfully analyze things instead of pushing whatever their agenda is and getting their stats. You used the phrase earlier, low-hanging fruit. And unfortunately, I feel like so many times, especially in the federal system, you see them go after the low-hanging fruit, the easy pickings, and everybody knows it's like, God, there's so many people above this that enabled this, that made this happen, and yet you're going after the little guy because they're easy targets. It's not to say that they're not. Some of them are not necessarily free of any culpability, but I mean, come on.
I remember the case of BW, and in that case, and I was actually working with another defense attorney at the time, and we went back, and the other friend said, "Hey, just come talk to this girl because I can't get a sense of what's going on." So we go back in the back. We're back in the back. It's in juvenile where it's all concrete, glass, big bars. Kids are in shackles. And there's this child that we then know is a child who's 13 years old, and standing around this child are CPS caseworkers, other individuals who are excessively frustrated. And I remember sitting there and listening to the other people frustrated and kind of kicking their heels. And the girl was just standing there, and she was just staring at me. And that had a profound impact on me because, to me, this kid was screaming and saying something without being able to say something because all of the other adult individuals had already made up their mind. And I think then I learned an incredibly important lesson, which was to try to listen to these victims. And so when I was at the DA's office, we talked to thousands of women. And I would always ask, and thank goodness for the defense bar, I'd say, hey, can I talk to your client? Nothing's going to be used against them, right?
Yeah,
and I would have the client
that's
there.
because people trusted you.
I know, and that's great, and I love that, right? But we got to establish that with the others because those individuals, mainly women, taught me what I needed to know to recognize their victimization.
Yeah.
And when they know that they are legitimately being heard, they will talk and they will disclose. And so I don't think the feds get that experience. No. They're not coming in contact with the masses, right?
Right.
And so however we can do that, and that's why I always do public awareness on human trafficking, and I always jokingly say we should have a foreign exchange program where prosecutors should have to be defense attorneys for a while, and defense attorneys should have to be prosecutors and to understand the other world.
I think, honestly, this is just me, as someone who has never been a prosecutor, it's not that I couldn't do it. In fact, I think I would if I went over there to be a prosecutor, there are some cases that I would just be like, I would be pretty hardcore on. I frankly would.
Right.
I think, you know. I think sometimes career prosecutors are sometimes some of the ones who are really truly good prosecutors, who can see justice and see that justice is done, are the ones who are able to balance things out better. I just think because, frankly, those of us who have been on the defense bar most of our life, we've seen some pretty bad stuff, you know, and actually had to have some pretty messed up conversations with people about some pretty messed up things. And I think that would probably color me from being the kind of prosecutor that I want to have on the other side of me.
I think we have to watch being jaded on both sides.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
But I will say my second trip back to the DA's office, when I had been a defense attorney, I valued that time, and I think I was a much better prosecutor.
Really?
I also had Jane Waters as my supervisor.
Yeah.
And so Jane would always say, I got your back, do what you think is the right thing. And so that was the way our whole division operated. And we made calls that were not popular, right? But if we, you know, there were a lot of times where our saying was arrest as recovery rather than conviction. We understood that there may be a time where law enforcement has to intervene to separate this individual from their pimp or their situation, but we never wanted to convict them.
Yeah.
And we knew that there was a line there. And so we tried to do everything that we could to help within this circumstance, but we also were stuck because we didn't have any other options. You know, we don't really have good structure for human trafficking. We have no shelters. We have no place to take these people.
It's true.
And so again, you're shoving this problem that should not be in the criminal justice system.
Well, it's
in
just like the
criminal
mental
justice
health
system.
problem.
Exactly.
I guess we should probably talk about the Kraft case, because that's one that everybody's talking about. And I forgot to say this at the top of the show. I want to thank you for fitting us into your TV schedule this week.
You're welcome.
I said that too, yeah.
You've been making the rounds this week.
So ever since Robert Kraft got arrested,
Yeah.
Which is great for the cause, right? I feel
Right.
terrible for his family that he's going through this public shaming, which is what he is going through.
Yeah.
Not a big fan of public shaming, but it brought attention to the reality of demand and buyers can be anybody. And so, yeah, we've been talking about it, and I think it's great to talk about it. I've mentioned a couple of people have called me and they've said like, hey, there's a spa down the street from me. What do you think that is? And by the way, a friend of mine walked in there and the woman walked out in a negligee. And I'm like, what do you think it is?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, these are some of these things that it is
Doesn't
all
take much
around the
common
city.
sense, yeah.
No, and part of that is if guys didn't go in and buy, right, you wouldn't have this issue.
Yeah, the market is there.
Is it that big?
Yes, it really is.
I mean, is it?
So there, I think, one, we've had misinformation, right? A lot of times, and I've even seen this come out of high-profile politicians that will put out a press release and say that somebody crossing the border is human trafficking. That's not human trafficking. That's human smuggling, right? Those are coyotes. It could have a component of human trafficking, but it's not necessarily human trafficking.
Right.
Human trafficking is most often domestic minors that are caught up in the game for sexual exploitation. So
Domestic minors.
domestic minors.
These are things that our own citizens are doing, not these people from Mexico and Guatemala and such.
Exactly. It is not a flood of a caravan of people coming over here to be put in spas. When we talk about the tracks, the streets, social media outlets that are getting these individuals, these are our kids. These are our CPS kids. These are the kids we've already failed previously in the system that then get out on the street in the game. And the average age of introduction into prostitution is 13. And so when these guys go in and say, well, I'm having sex with a willing individual, they're not willing because they got started at a young age, and usually it's trauma and abuse and they can't get out of it. But you might be on top of a 14 or 15-year-old. And so we had a number of cases that we prosecuted, Johns, for sexual assault of a child and compelling prostitution. And so just as I would talk to all the individuals that were charged that were sellers or the women, I would also ask defense attorneys, can I talk to the Johns, the guys, once we started really prosecuting them? And everybody would always say, well, it's my first time. I've never done it before, and I don't believe that. And then people would say, I was sitting around, racy restaurant at lunch with all my buddies, and everybody just says, well, you just go on Backpage and you can get yourself a girl, and you don't have to worry about her reaching out and telling your wife, right? And so I think we have to shift that thinking that this is okay, or I'm helping put this girl through college. And I can't tell you how many penis pics I've seen from where these guys will send pictures of their penis, and I really think they think this girl really wants to have sex with them. Well, I got news for you. When you are sending that racy pic, when you are sending all those racy texts about what you're going to do, you're talking to the pimp because she's with somebody else in the room. And so you're actually getting this scary dude who's talking about what he's going to do to you, and it's not really her because she's already got another person. I mean, there's no excuse. It's not acceptable, but it's telling guys you can't. Don't buy sex.
Well,
that's just the easy answer.
Where's it at? Where's the? No, I don't mean it like that. It's terrible. But where's? I mean it like where's this? Is it Backpage? Is it strip clubs? Is it spas?
So Backpage has been shut down, fortunately.
There's a lawsuit.
There's a lawsuit. Annie McAdams and is really taking on the civil side and suing some people. And Anna and I work with them to try to help on where they're going. I think it's fantastic of what they're doing on the civil side because they're going after social media, hotels, truck stops. But where is it? It's on social media. Backpage shuts down as something else opens up, right? So now you got to take the fight there. It's on tracks, which are streets in the area where guys know that they can go buy it, cantinas, these massage parlors, which are often an Asian culture. And so you have many different areas of which you can find it, and they're all culturally very different.
Yeah, see, I mean, I think that there are places where there are people who are willingly engaging in the prostitution, okay?
I agree.
I think there are escort services. There are women who affirmatively have gone into becoming strippers, who then travel all over the country to become what's affectionately known as professionals in the industry. So I mean, I think I believe that there are a lot more willing participants than some people probably want to acknowledge, but I think there's also a lot less than what those who are out there saying, oh, well, this is just two consenting adults. I mean, yeah, I get that, okay? And there is a lot of that. I mean, look, there are people who they're lonely, they're socially awkward, they are, everything else when it comes to dating, sex, everything, and the easiest thing for them to do is have something like this that is doesn't require them to actually do much. They can as there was a line I think it was attributed to Charlie Sheen one time, but they asked some celebrity why do you sleep with prostitutes? Why do you do that? And you could have any other actress or any other woman you want, and you wouldn't have to pay them. And I mean, this is how the individual thought is. It's like, it's just I'm awkward in the relationship. I mean, there's legitimate stuff like that, but there is this whole component, as you say, of trafficking girls from a very young age and getting them into it because it makes money.
Well,
It's an industry.
And I'm just playing devil's advocate here, okay? How does two adults who consent and who enter into this relationship perpetuate human trafficking of children? I mean, how does that? Is it a spillover?
No, but think about it. I mean, it's if there is a willing market for it, and you're a crime overlord, okay, this is good money for you, right? And so what do? You can go out. I mean, look, what is this idiot R. Kelly saying that he, the parents sold the girls to him? I mean, okay, well, you're charged with rape and you admit to human trafficking. I don't
also
that one.
Think about this. When you say, how does this spill over to children? It goes to the demand of what they want.
Right.
And I have seen in these cases with text messages between what they want, and they'll ask for the younger one with braces. And so what you have created is a population of people that can't go rape their neighbor's 12-year-old because she's going to be able to identify him. Mm-hmm. And so by the access of what are most often children, these pedophiles
Yes.
get to have sex with a population that can't defend themselves,
Correct.
and the individual will not. Now, I agree with you. There probably is, and I do believe there is a segment of people who may say, I want to do this, and they're willing and they're adults, but I do think it's the exception and not the rule. We've been treating it the other way.
I don't know that it's the exception. I think there's a fair percentage of it. I just think that, the overwhelming percentage is what you suggest.
Yes.
It's human trafficking. It is where people are going, like you say, where pedophiles are going, because there's a market for that, and they are exploiting a market of all these creepsters who that are getting charged with possession of child pornography, all that sort of stuff. I mean, there are some real sick people out there, and I don't think people understand that, and a lot of this is feeding that demand for what these sickos want. I mean, look. And the reality is the internet has completely changed the game.
It boomed it.
It did.
Yeah.
Because think about it, just and taking this aside, I mean, have you seen some of these videos of these people who like dress up as a dog and live their life as a dog?
No.
Huh? I mean, have
No.
you seen this?
I have not.
Wilfred?
Yeah, like a human who lives their life dressed up as a dog, and they walk around on all four. I mean, and they do a New York Times article on it because it's socially acceptable now. I mean, there are some weirdos out there. There are people who want to live their life as a frickin' dog, okay? And it's bizarre, but we have some messed up people out there, and this is feeding into that. I mean, there's a segment of people who are obsessed with, there's some sick guys out there who are obsessed with young girls.
Let me also say, one of the things we did when I was a prosecutor was started a court for those individuals between 17 and 25. Mm-hmm. And part of it was a research project. And one of the questions that got asked was, do you want prostitution decriminalized? And I have to say, I thought they might answer yes. But they answered no. And so I had to think about that, and I realized a lot of the people that were there that had committed prostitution, but they were not human trafficking victims, which is why we created this alternative program, they had kids. And so it is what they had to do to help their kids get by. Mm-hmm. And I realized they don't want us to say, if you got to feed your 3 kids, you can go out and suck the next 5 people that walk down the street, and that's a way you have to make it, and you can make a living.
Yeah.
Because they might do it because they'd have to. And that's the other thing I hear people say, and in one of these TV shows, this guy said something about, these are just whores, right? And then I saw him later, and we had mutual friends, and he said, hey, I'm really sorry. I found out who you are and everything you've done on this, and I know I said something the other day, and I said, you know what, it's okay, because you're never going to say it again. And so part of it is changing people's perceptions and realizing
Right.
the old attitudes that we had, the old impressions that we've had, those are not what we're seeing. It is a very vulnerable population, needs protection by the state, and from us as defense attorneys. We need to be able to see that population in criminal court because there are a lot of our clients. They're just on the edge. They're hanging on by a thread. And so you see theft, you see possession, you see all kinds of other offenses that we can help them.
Man, we're getting the signal to wrap this thing up. This was like the fastest hour.
That was fast. We just got to where the marketplace is. There's like a whole.
Because we spent so long talking about
UT football.
UT football.
Well, we can do it again.
Points down.
Well,
We'll get her back. All right, I'm getting the signal, ladies and gentlemen. That's all the time we have for tonight. So I want to thank Ann Johnson for joining us again.
Thank you.
We're going to bring you back.
Good.
We've got more to talk about.
Love
This is
to.
a never-ending conversation, I feel like.
Yeah.
And there'll be more. Apparently, there's a big name that's going to come out at some point, a bigger name than Kraft.
Yeah, that's what we've heard.
So, maybe once we
We'll
get
come
that,
back.
we can bring it back. For my co-pilot, the lovely, talented, great Julio Vela. That's all the time we have for this week, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be back next week with another episode of Reasonable Doubt. So till then, good night.